Hey there guys! So let's start looking at the first of the achievement standards we'll be completing this year. That is AS91877, or the proposal. The main part of this standard is to go over what it is we'll be creating as our digital media outcome, who it's for, and what needs to be in it. As we know, for our Year 11 project this year, we'll be making a website for a stakeholder. We'll discuss stakeholders more in a little bit. We should have had some time learning the basics of HTML and CSS, possibly even a bit of JavaScript. Don't worry, there will be more time throughout the year to upskill ourselves as a class before beginning the actual development. Now let's look at this document. As we see, it's broken up into a few different sections, those being the planning, research, proposal, improvement, and the final section. We'll start looking at the top, at the planning stage. To begin, before we can start doing anything towards making a website, we need to be answered this stage. In particular, the first three parts. We need to source a stakeholder, who we're going to be making this website for. A stakeholder could be a family member, a family or close friend. It could even be a teacher within the school, and I've spoken to quite a few who have put their names forward. You can inquire with me as to who they are. The main thing is that the stakeholder needs to be somebody who is not yourself, that you will be making the website for, that can give you reliable feedback, reliable and timely feedback. You and your stakeholder will need to derive a purpose. Why should you be making them a website? Do they want to inform people about something they're quite knowledgeable about? Or do they want to promote a way to hire them for a service they offer, like yard maintenance or dog walking? Do they want a platform for students to find out everything about their course, similar to the class websites I already offer? Whatever it is, you and your stakeholder will need to decide that amongst yourselves. It is important that you feel free to shop around for stakeholders and negotiate what the purpose of the website actually is. Remember, while the website is ultimately for your stakeholder, you need to enjoy making it, because this is your year-long project. It's quite a big investment of time, and if you're not enjoying it from the get-go, you're not going to enjoy it in term 3. So once you've found a stakeholder, and you've both agreed on a purpose, we can start to fill in these first two questions. Your purpose should be written to explain why you are doing something. For example, my stakeholder is looking for an alternative way to promote their graphic design business to a larger audience. They want to be able to show off their work and have people contact them about jobs and commissions. Notice how this doesn't really explain in any way how I will be doing this for them. It's just something that me and this fictional stakeholder have agreed as to why they want a website. The next part involves explaining who your stakeholder is. This is an ideal point to add some background information about their business. For example, my stakeholder is named Jake Expense. They are a graphic designer that specializes in logo and sticker design. They've been designing for many years now, but have only been commercially designing for about the past 3, with limited success. They are the owner and operator of a startup design company called Expense Design, and specialize in pastel chibi designs. This gives a larger amount of insight onto who your stakeholder is, and some background into their passion and ambition for this project. This might include a little bit of upfront interviewing to acquire, and that's perfectly fine. So after this, you can start to write the next phase of the planning section, the end user. So the end users are your stakeholders' clients, or people who are actually going to be visiting and using the website if your stakeholder chooses to make it go live. So how can you categorize the group of people who are your stakeholders' clients? Is your stakeholder trying to target a certain gender, age group, ethnic or cultural background? Is there a shared hobby or interest you'd expect the end users to have, such as they'd probably enjoy a certain sport, or they probably like Pokemon, based on the product or service that your stakeholder provides. This is where you need to start to put people into boxes. For example, Expense Design offers a pastel chibi character design. Because of this, the end user is more likely to be female of a teenage to young adult age range. This leads into user requirements. For these specific people on this specific website, what is it that I will need to include? My website will need to be easy to navigate and portray the art style of my stakeholder with its colors, fonts, and images used. In terms of functions, my website will need to offer a way for end users to view the designs which have a watermark over them, and a way for my end users to contact my stakeholder for commissions. Once the requirements are filled out, that's this section done. This here is the backbone of our entire project, laying out all the base planning you've done and briefly explaining who you're making it for and what they need. This is where the research kicks in. This is likely going to be the largest section of this document, and that's because it's going to include quite a few screenshots. When looking at existing media, you should look at similar websites that don't need to be the same in everywhere, and pulling out things that you like about them. For example, you might like the colors of one website that does something completely different to your stakeholder. Still include that here and mention why it is that you like it just under the image. This image can include whole page screenshots of certain websites, or just snippets of certain things that you quite like navigation bars or buttons. It can include things like functions or features you like, aesthetic choices such as fonts, colors, certain image styles. This is all a part of starting to form an idea of what is out there already. And this can help you form later on in the proposal what it is you want to offer your stakeholder. So make sure that after each image you include a very short analysis identifying what it is that you like about the picture. This next section is called conventions. Now that you've looked at a range of websites, at least 3 unique websites for the existing media section above, it's time to start identifying similarities that you're seeing. This section should include a list of conventions you found and why they would be used. For example, most websites I have noticed have a navigation system along the top of the page. This is a place where users would expect to see it, so it makes sense to leave it there. I also noticed that most of the navigation bars are laid out in a conventional method, with the logos on the left-hand side. This also acts as a home button. They then have a range of pages that the site offers, and those with multiple pages, more than can fit on the bar, have drop-down menus inside of them. I've also noticed that contact is normally the last button on that line. List out at least 4 or 5 different conventions that you've noticed along not only websites in general, but this specific type of website you'll be making. This next section mentions HCI heuristics. You can find them under the HCI tab of your class website. With any luck, you've gone over these and have a fair idea of what they are, but I'll go over a few of them now. This section also asks you to identify some of the heuristics and explain how you might think about using them. For example, mention the heuristic, visibility of system status, and explain what it is briefly. This heuristic talks about how the user should be informed by the system with what is going on at any given point. This includes identifying where they are within the system and offering timely feedback. Now explain how you can see this. An example from the screenshots above would be useful. I would take that and copy it. An example of this heuristic can be seen as active pages are underlined or with a different color so that the user can at a glance see where they are. This also informs the user with stored system information such as prices of items and the quantity of stock left. You can now say how you might use this in your design. My website could implement this heuristic by also identifying the active page in a different color. After all this research, we come to the questionnaire. This is where you can ask, or if you've already asked, write them down here, your stakeholder questions and answers about what it is they want. These questions can include, but are not limited to, things like what colors should I use as the primary and accent colors on the website? What pages do you think the website will need? Are you comfortable with putting private information such as your name and email address on the website? Could you supply images of your work for the site, or are you okay with stock images? All of these kinds of questions are things that are going to inform our proposal, which is the next step. Now, we're up to the proposal. The proposal box looks quite small in comparison to what we've done so far, but it's focused on combining the first part into an actual outcome. What is your solution? Now that you've looked into what exists, you've asked your stakeholder what it is they want, you have an informed perspective, we can begin this portion of the document. Now, the proposal portion is best answered in the following layout. What pages you are going to have, a list of those, and then for each individual page, do this. Page 1, home page. What is this page going to look like? Use screenshots from your research above and things like color palettes and fonts that you've researched and discussed with your stakeholder to help answer that. What can you do on this page? What sort of features or functions is it going to have? Once again, screenshots from your research above would help out here. What conventions does this page have? So on your first page, you're going to mention quite a few conventions, things like the navigation bar, the footer, the heading sections, things like that. And then for each subsequent page, you're just going to mention what's unique to that page. And lastly, quite briefly, how does this page meet the requirements you've laid out at the beginning and help with the purpose in general? So just a small little statement on your home page. Does this meet any of the requirements you discussed at the beginning? If so, how? And how does it help with the purpose? So you're going to repeat that process of what it looks like, what you can do on it, conventions and requirements for each of the pages. This is the best way to lay this section out with proper spacing, and it's the easiest for your stakeholder to read. You'll need to send this proposal to your stakeholder or otherwise share it with them. You'll also need to share it with at least 3 unique peers within this class or within the school. This is for the feedback portion you see just below. You can simply paste your stakeholder's response here. Make sure to include your correspondence with them if it's in multiple sections. Make sure that when you're talking to them, you ask firstly for feedback. Ask them to identify things that they like the sound of or things that rather change. Ask if there are enough or too many pages, or if they want something else to be added or removed that wasn't present. It is your job to put their feedback here. The improvements is definitely the shortest part of this document, but probably one of the most important. It really solidifies if your document is getting achieved or a higher level grade. If you're able to identify changes that are needed, either based on peer feedback, on stakeholder feedback, or if you're able to identify things yourself by looking at other people's documents or just internal reflection, that's going to go in here. All you need to do for this section is write what changes you've identified you should make and why. For example, based on feedback, I can consolidate the 2 pages of Meet the Artist and Contact Us into one page, as most people would expect to find contact information on the Meet the Artist page also. Now we're down to the final. This is where excellence is made. This is where we'll be laying out our final solution, which is going to be a combination of our original solution and the improvements we've just mentioned. This is going to be laid out in the format of that first part of our first proposal. We will then need to explain how our solution solves the problem we identified in the very beginning of this document in the next section. We will then identify how we considered all of the conventions and requirements that we have identified in the next section. And finally, we're going to identify the heuristics we'll be meeting and how we're going to be meeting them. Now here's something new: resources and scope. Resources refer to the things we're going to need to complete this project. This is more broad than you may think. These first ones that I'm going to talk about are ones that will apply to everyone. Make sure to include specific ones that are catered to just your project also. A resource I will need is time. This project is due in week 6 or 7 or whenever it is of term 3. That includes the designing of the website and the development of it. I will have time during class to do this. I have X number of timetabled periods a cycle, and I can dedicate some at-home time to it consistently also. And you can be more specific there. Another resource will be devices. The device I will be using may be a school or personal device. This would also impact how often I can use it and how powerful my device is. I can specify that here. The software I'll be using to make this website is Visual Studio Code. I'll be writing it in HTML and CSS primarily. Then there are some more obscure resources that you need to consider. A resource that I have is Mr. Spence, to help me with one-on-one in-class assistance, and I can contact him with questions I have outside of school hours. Ideally not when he's getting married. Mr. Spence will be able to answer some of my questions, but there are other resources I have to help me, such as online tutorials and forums and things like that, such as W3 Schools, Stack Overflow, and YouTube videos. I will use these to upskill myself when it comes to websites. I will also ask and seek peer assistance where appropriate. Another resource I'm going to need is my stakeholder. This is a key resource, as this website is for them, and I need to get their feedback through the planning and design stages. User testing is a resource I will utilize when I'm actually developing the website, to have my peers try and break my website and identify bugs I may have overlooked. Other resources exist, but you'll have to find them and lay them out in this section. Lastly, scope. As you see, there are 3 boxes. What I hope to achieve is, at a minimum, what pages am I going to have, and what's going to be on them. What is going to be done. What I will add if time permits is your ideal outcome for this project. If I had enough time, I'd make a custom graphics for the banner. I'll make a custom browser logo. Things like that. What would be cool to add, but is outside the scope of this project, is where you can run wild with things you'd make for your stakeholder. All to help them meet their purpose, of course. If I could, I would make a custom advertisement and add that to the homepage of the website. I'd also make a custom font. I'd take all the photos for this website myself. I'd add a complete social media setup with Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok, and so on and so on. You can go really crazy here. Be very specific to your project though. Remember, anything you mention should ultimately help them with their purpose. And once you've done that, this entire document is finished. You know what you want to make, you know what pages you've talked to your stakeholder about, what they want on it as well, and you've even gone into development of what could be done in the future. You're now ready to start designing the website, which is the next step. So, until then,